Ancient Galilee was a region defined by the soil. It was an agrarian society where survival was tied directly to the back-breaking labor required to pull food from the earth. In lakeside towns like Chorazin, Bethsaida, and Capernaum, Jesus spoke to crowds who lived in the dust. These were the people working the fields and hauling heavy nets from the water daily. These citizens were caught between two weights. They faced the physical exhaustion of primitive farming and the financial strain of Roman taxation, which often stripped away what little they managed to produce. When Jesus looked out at this specific crowd, he saw an audience on the verge of total physical and spiritual collapse. To these exhausted workers, he offers a famous invitation: "Come to me, all you who labor and are overburdened, and I will give you rest." But he immediately attaches a condition to that promise: "Shoulder my yoke."
In the 1st century, a yoke was a heavy wooden beam designed to force draft animals to pull massive weight. It was the primary tool of agricultural labor. Offering a tool of forced labor to people already crushed by work creates a strange contradiction. Historically and mechanically, a yoke is the opposite of rest. Jesus addresses this contradiction by first praising God for hiding the truth from the learned and the clever. At the time, the learned were the religious elite who had constructed a massive, intricate system of legal requirements. To be considered righteous, a person had to navigate hundreds of complex laws, a mental and spiritual burden few could actually carry. Jesus contrasts that elite legalistic system with his preferred recipients of truth, mere children. He was speaking about the uneducated day laborers standing right in front of him. A child lacks the ego to overcomplicate faith. Unlike the religious elite, these laborers knew they couldn't save themselves through their own intellect or perfect adherence to a legal code. That reliance on human logic and strict rules was the true source of their exhaustion. Approaching God with childlike humility becomes the necessary first step toward actual relief. To understand why this yoke brings rest, look at its physical design. Built for two animals working in tandem, it was designed for partnership, not solitary struggle. Jesus calls his yoke easy, krestos, well-fitting. Carpenters carved the wood to match the animal's neck, preventing chafing. This diagram shows the mechanics of the offer. By telling the crowd to take up his yoke, Jesus is inviting them into the empty loop beside him. The weight shifts to his side of the beam, meaning he carries the true burden of salvation. The work of living remains, but the divine partnership changes the nature of the effort. The burden feels light because the wearer is no longer pulling it alone. Our modern exhaustion looks different than that of 1st century Galilee, but it is no less real. We still attempt to intellectualize our way out of anxiety, believing that if we can just research or plan enough, we can solve every problem through sheer brain power. In that process, we voluntarily put on ill-fitting yokes, the demand for perfection, the need for absolute control, and equating our worth with output. This creates a crushing psychological toll. We operate believing we must carry the entire weight of our lives and failures entirely on our own shoulders. Modern burnout is often the result of wearing a yoke we were never designed to carry by ourselves. In this context, rest isn't the absence of activity or the disappearance of our responsibilities. Difficulty and labor are baked into the human experience. They are unavoidable. Peace depends entirely on how we carry those burdens and who we are tethered to while we walk the field. The invitation is to drop the heavy yokes of pride and self-reliance and adopt the humility of a child who knows they need a partner. We find rest for our souls only by surrendering our solitary struggle to the gentle, well-fitting yoke of divine guidance.